Everybody. People a second to trickle in. And if you're one of the first people here, just go ahead and let me know if the audio and video is working. Has been lately, so fingers crossed. But I will give people a few seconds to trickle in. Howdy, Dark Knight Cowboy. Let me know if you can hear me just fine. Haven't had audio issues in a while. Don't want to jinx it. It's always good to know before I start rambling that everyone can actually hear me. And start thinking about if you guys have any questions, because I just have just only the crazy 100 things that have happened in the last week or whatever to talk about, which probably half of them I won't even remember. Good to know. Danny says 5x5. Sounds like it's working all right. Good. This old trusty blue snowball microphone has been serving me well for 10 years now. Probably just jinxed the hell out of it. Since we get to a few more people in here, we can start talking about. I don't like having to. What I realize is when I launch right into everything, right in the beginning of a video, people who show up even a few minutes after it starts, which is probably most of the viewers, then I just have to rehash exactly what every topic. And since I don't script everything, I probably won't even remember what I just said. What's up to Sean and HM Chef? Welcome everyone. So it does even though it's interesting because the past week or so, 2 weeks maybe, has almost felt like a lull compared to the craziness. It's crazy that a period of time such as the last 2 weeks is a lull in terms of things going on. Well, feels like it just because of how much has been going on, because there's been plenty of interesting and significant, potentially unsettling things that have happened within the past few weeks. One of the interesting things, we'll start with finance, because I think that's what everything right now, other than just the weird elements of human nature that always come into play. What we're seeing right now that's controlling most, or not even controlling, but what is the impetus for everything that's happening in the world right now, including all the or not all of it, but most of the geopolitical things like with Russia and China and Iran and the Middle East. That's a whole other thing. But it's the finances. It's what we're seeing, the last flickering of the candle of the global debt-based fiat system that started with the petrodollar. And we're seeing that, the whole ecosystem is trying to figure out what's going to happen and what's going to come next, because the fuse has been lit, let's put it that way. It's only a matter of time before the current system is transformed, whether that's through a collapse, whether that's through something better, miraculously springing up and everyone seamlessly moves to it, whatever. The point is the current system is mortal and we're reaching the end of its life cycle, whether that end is 5 months, 5 years, or 15 years. It's not 50 years. It's going to be, assuming I don't die what I would consider to be prematurely, I'm going to see the end of this system. Whether from inside the gulag or outside of it. I think we're a lot closer to the 5-month time frame than we are to the 15-year, but I'm always a little bit rushed on these timelines. And it's probably going to be a couple years, but we're seeing some very interesting things happening. And the least significant of which is certainly not all of these countries knowingly, consciously, and openly planning on ways to move away from the current economic system. And I really think a lot of what's going on with Russia is about protecting that system. We cannot we as in the US, it's why we crushed Gaddafi in Libya, it's why we crushed Saddam. There's plenty of warlords and dictators and stuff all over the world. The reason why we've gone after some and not others always comes down to the money. To a lesser extent, the oil, but that's still always about money. And more important than money, the dollar, the system. Because if a big country, a massive country like Russia. It's physically massive, has a large population, a huge military, obviously. You can consider it a second world country, but it's a major player in every sense of the word. If it's able to break free from the current financial system, which it has, we actually cut it free from that ourselves as a punishment. And then we need it, the current system needs it to die as a result of that. Because if it doesn't, then that's an alternate path that everyone can take and not be beholden to the US dollar, because we are no longer at the point, which we were at one point, but we are not at the point, the US, where we are enjoying this power of the system because of any rightful logistical reason. Like we're not, it's just because the system already existed. And now we're at the top of it, they don't want to give it up. But we're killing the currency. We're not really producing anything to the extent that we used to be. We're making insane decisions that are require continual exponential increase in the money supply to support all the domestic and international choices that we make. And the talk from both sides of the aisle leading up to this presidential election is just proof that there is nowhere to go but up inflation. And I've said this, it is my most highest conviction opinion of anything related to politics or international relations or finances is that we know the fact that the debt will not be paid off in a literal sense, that it has to either be defaulted upon or inflated away. And it's my highest conviction opinion of pretty much any arena that they will go the route of further debasing the currency and inflating away the debt in that sense. Which may take weird forms, it may take the form of trying to switch to a new currency or whatever, but the point is the same. There is zero realistic chance of us increasing our actual productive capacity to the extent that we can make up the gap of the spending and the promised spending, the unfunded liabilities like Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and all this stuff without, you could literally try to cut spending, but I always ask people, okay, tell me where you're going to cut this much spending. It's trillions of dollars a year. Tell me where you're going to cut this without every major city looking like Mogadishu within several weeks, because just look at how much is dependent, how much of everything that's going on in the country right now is dependent on government spending of some kind. And even the direct government spending, that's not even counting the fact that if you took away the direct spending, all the others, like think of all the grocery stores that exist because the people are spending money there because of their food stamps, of all these other, DoorDash or whatever, like all these, the housing market, all the jobs related to that, like there's all these different things that would cascade down if that money stopped flowing in, even in just those few spaces, the Medicare, the Medicaid, even the military. If we say, well, we don't need to be in hundreds of countries around the world, that if I was certainly in charge, or if I was in charge, that would certainly be one of the places that we would absolutely be forced to reduce spending, is this insane amount on the military all over the globe. Pull it back to be more domestic, protect our domestic interests only. But even then, think that's trillions of dollars that's being spent. All those people that are being paid, all those defense contractors that are getting that money, that are then paying their engineers, that are then paying their accountants, that are then spending the money at the Walmart and the grocery store, and they're paying to get their hair done. They're paying to buy cars. They're paying to go to restaurants. They're paying for their kids to go to college. Who are then pay, you know what I mean? So like this is all the economic activity that's wrapped up in GDP. It includes government spending, and to be able to shrink the economy by enough to close that gap is, it's not literally impossible. You could just stop spending it, but like what the country would look like at that point would be like fourth world in some areas. It would just the economic activity would be like absolute zero, would grind to a halt because there is no real production happening. All this spending is happening because of the government spending. And certainly foreign aid would be another one too. And that's easy one, because that money isn't even coming back in a lot of ways in the same way that, a lot of military spending is. And then that's not even to mention the fact that our current US dollar Federal Reserve note system cannot actually withstand a deflationary like collapse because of the fact that there is always more debt than dollars to pay it off. If that starts to shrink, money is literally disappearing out of the system and causes an insane deflationary implosion. So it literally can't be done anyway without just literally freezing all economic system to an entire, ice cold halt. So they're going to do what all the countries have always done, what allows them to maintain some semblance of power and feel like they have some semblance of control and easing into maybe just when they can kick the can further down the road or not have to deal with and such an insane situation now is they're going to in some form or another inflate away. And like I mentioned, both candidates, Donald Trump included, especially Kamala Harris, is I talked about this as maybe 2 years ago or more, might have been last year, about how we are going to see price controls. And what are they doing? They're literally talking about not even like couching it in weird language. They're talking about actual, just literal price controls. We're going to stop what they call price gouging, which they don't give you any definition ever for what counts as gouging. They focus specifically on the things that are expensive, not on profit margins. Like there's some industries out there that just have insane profit margins, are completely predatory, that they ignore and then focus on something like groceries, where these huge grocery chains have like Walmart, they focus on the absolute amount, and I'm not in love of Walmart. It's some giant corporation. I don't care. But the point is, they have like a pretty razor thin profit margin compared to most other industries. It's like a low single digit percentage, like 1.5%, 2% profit margins. So they focus on the fact that they made 150, or multiple billions of dollars in profit, even though they had hundreds of billions of dollars in revenue and all the massive and sustained infrastructure that you need to support that. And there was just, I think Lynn Alden showed a chart on Twitter just yesterday, the day before, about how those profit margins as a percentage have actually stayed pretty tight. It's been between like 1% and 3%. I think if you add, it's like, going like this because of just variations in all these different markets with COVID and supply chain disruptions and the kind of Cantillon effect, the yo-yo effect, all that sort of slinky effect, whatever you want to call it, of supply chain gluts and then all of a sudden scarcity. But if you like actually draw a trend line, it's pretty flat, because costs are rising, so expenses are rising, so they raise prices, so that makes revenues rise. So they say, oh, this revenue has gone up, so your profit has gone up, but their profit as a percentage hasn't really gone up. If they say we're making 2% on this can of Stag chili in the store, if the Stag chili goes from 5%, or I'm sorry, from $5 to $10, they're making twice as much money on it, even though it's the same percent roughly profit margin, which that's not something that needs to be dealt with or can even be dealt with by fiat, by legislation, because you're not actually addressing and certainly not controlling any of the actual reasons why those expenses have gone up. And at the same time, which is what's completely deceptive and counterproductive and evil about it, is they're squeezing the farmers and everyone who's actually producing, and then trying to act like they're don't want prices to be expensive. They're just going to literally make a law about what you can set the price at. Whereas if you want to make food cheaper, make it easier and cheaper to produce, lower the taxes on the producers, lower the fuel, you could do a ton of different things that would actually drastically increase the supply of this, whatever it is you want to be cheaper. Because that's the only way, there's only two ways you can affect prices of something. You can increase the supply of that item, or you can decrease the demand. Price controls do neither of those things. So all you're doing is making a law at the surface level about what people are allowed to do, but it doesn't change the supply and demand curve. So it can actually, just create black markets for these things, to where the actual supply and demand has not been changed in either sense. So the market price of the can of Stag chili might be $10, and you say, nope, you're not allowed to sell it for more than $5. So what does that do? If you look at a supply demand curve, it creates an almost infinite demand for that product at $5. So then the first person who gets in there, which would be me and you, because we know about this, so if we don't already have it, If we see a can of Sag chili at $5 because that's the only thing they're allowed to sell it at, what are you going to do? We're going to buy them. And that's not evil or wrong. That's the intelligent thing to do, because if you don't do it, the next person is going to do it. And as I've always said, resource allocation is a zero-sum game. What isn't allocated to you and your people will be allocated to someone else. So you can feel bad about it. You can try to be act all pious and sanctimonious about it, about helping people, but anything you give to another person is coming away from your family. So that doesn't mean you still can't do any sort of charity, but it does mean that you have to be conscious of that decision. And any price control steps up does not affect that. And so all it's going to do is create black markets, create scarcities where things are just not available because people won't even bother. You will cripple the supply, because if you can't actually, just like we always talk about with the gold and silver, and at above a certain price, or sorry, below a certain price, it's not worth it to mine it out of the ground. If you said, gold's getting a little expensive, let's make it so a law that it can only be $500 an ounce, you're not even going to dig it up, because you can't dig it up for $500 an ounce, and you're not going to pay someone to put gold out into the market to not even make money. And what does that do? That cripples the supply even further, which drives the actual price up even more and creates even more of a disparity. And that's all it's ever going to do with price controls. It is such a bizarre, it's just communism. It is pure communism to think that this stuff can work. Like I said, the root of like the liberal financial ideology is that the natural state of the world is abundance, and somehow it's being kept from everyone by poor decision making or evil Republicans / conservatives, whatever. And if you just control it, you can just dish it out fairly to everyone, from each according to his ability, to each according to his need. The problem with that is not that it's couldn't ever be done in some situations, is that there is no cap on need, and there's absolutely logistical caps and limitations on production. And we're running into that right now. See if we got any comments. We live in extremely interesting times. Sonny Croc says, get rid of the civil service next to the war and poverty and SS social services, the thing, worst thing ever done. I mean, it's insane the amount of different agencies and organizations and things that the government's doing. And what's so crazy is people think of these things as being like absolutely ubiquitous and necessary. And like, you can't cancel, but like the one I saw recently was like the Department of Education. I don't even think it existed in the 60s or something like that. What year was the Department of Education founded? Was it created? 1980. So if you were to tell most people, especially liberals, we need to just abolish the Department of Education, to them that they feel like you're saying, because they just don't understand anything. They don't understand anything. They don't research anything. It's purely all rhetorical feelings for them. But if you'd said, we need to abolish the Department of Education, they think you're saying to abolish all education, all public schools, but like this department didn't even exist in 1970s, 1960s, 1950s. We had public schools. We had higher institutions of higher learning. We had all this stuff. There is not one single metric for education that has improved since 1980 to now. And it's the cost of it per student, for tuition, for everything has just astronomically increased. So all this stuff is wasted. I guarantee you could cut 80 to 90% of all federal agencies and employees. And after the initial tumult, that would be a huge net benefit. Just like Elon Musk did with Twitter. Everything is a Pareto in life. Pareto principle is what's commonly known as the 80-20 rule. It doesn't always apply directly to 80-20%, but it's almost always true that a huge portion of the benefit / problems are created by a small portion of the group. And it usually works out to about 80-20. So 80% of your problems are caused by 20% of the issues or 20% of the people. 80% of the benefit or work is being done by a different 20% of people, etc. So it's always in your best interest as an individual, a business owner, a group, or whatever, to put a lot of effort into determining who's who and pretty ruthlessly applying what you learned to get rid of the dead weight. What's being censored live? I see your comments. Destiny says stop all foreign aid, limit SSA to only citizens. Of course. I mean, it's just absolutely insane, literal insanity for anyone to think that benefits of a country can be. It has nothing to do with the morality of it, which is a whole different story. Just to, you cannot just have an unlimited giving away of resources, um, because needs are not our needs are not finite, but resources are. And people don't realize, like, just from a game theory perspective, like if you have, let's say you have two different cities, city of a town of 5,000 people and a town of 100,000 people, and you have some sort of resource in there, like that relies on integrity and kind of high group trust, like one of those, let's say it's those libraries that they set up. It's like take a book, leave a book, that kind of thing, or a restaurant where some element of it is self-serve, like you buy the food, but all the condiments are self-serve or something. What do you think the difference is between the amount of people it takes of, let's call them bandits in like a, or hawks, to use a game theory term, to try to exploit the system for it to fail in the 5,000 person town versus the 100,000 person town? So you have one of those old library buildings, it's unmanned, supposed to take a book, leave a book, and a certain number of people take to exploit it. What do you think? What's your guess for the number of people it takes, the difference between the 100,000 person town and the 5,000 person town? Any guesses? What's up, Steve? Of how many would take in either case to completely collapse the system? Nobody's answering, but the answer is the same in both cases. It's one. One single exploitative actor can destroy either of those systems, regardless of if it's a town of 5 people, 5,000 people, 5 million people. It only takes a single person to decide they just want to go take all the books, and the system utterly is ruined. And it's insane the amount of resources we're like wasting to do things like that, like the 9/11 slash emergency room system, where they're forced to treat people. There's something like I said, the Pareto or whatever, where this tiny group of people is taking up just an almost complete amount of the resources of time. Where in some of these cities, there's like single digit number of people or double digit number of people who are responsible for thousands, that small group responsible for thousands of emergency room visits every year. And it's literally, like I said, resources is a zero-sum game. Doctors' hours that they're on staff is a zero-sum game. The physical latex gloves that they have to put on, the antibiotics, the painkillers, the beds, the seats in the waiting room, those are all limited resources, and allocating them is a zero-sum game. And there's nothing is ever being done to kind of determine, to triage this at all. And we're definitely seeing that with the illegal immigrants, which to some extent is being done on purpose, at least for the terms of, gerrymandering and allocating seats and potentially creating mail-in ballots and, even allowing them to vote in some cases. So that stuff's all being done, at least knowingly. But just everything else that goes along with that, it's just soaking up resources to the extent that, like I said, that's coming from somewhere. These are real resources. And the liberal idea of that, like, oh, resources are abundant and infinite, we just got to make sure everyone gets it so they're not hoarded by evil businessmen or something, is just an extremely destructive and catastrophically destructive way of looking at the situation. And we're getting to the end. Like I said, I don't know if that end's going to be 5 months, 5 years, or 15 years, but it's not 50 years. And we're running up to the physical limitations of, to use the analogy, like I said, of a little book. You can, for a while, that town can say, oh, well, let's go refill the book, free library every day. And then more and more, when one person can still empty it every day, when you have 10 people going there every day, you have to supply a lot of books when 10 people are going there to empty it every day. And eventually you don't have enough money to do that, or you take enough money away to do that, it's lefting the other things that you should be doing in your town, and the system can no longer support it. And that's what, especially now when we're getting to the point where the dollar will start to show some significant weaknesses. And for the people who say that's not happening, gold is at a literal all-time high of $2,500. And I've been banging that drum for years. And I wish it wasn't happening yet. I don't have enough. I want more. I want more. I want more to put more of it, wealth into physical gold and silver. And that's not financial advice. You don't want to take financial advice from a brokey like me. But I like what Bill Holter says when people ask him about how much should I put in gold and silver. He says, how much do you not want to lose? Stag chili is great for kids and for adults. I wrote this book in 1990. Which book? But the hot and spicy stag chili is so good. I'm a typical gringo where I like a little bit of zest, but not really spicy. Um, I like the Laredos. I'll try the hot and spicy. I know my girl likes spicy stuff. Are you seeing my book collection? 500 isn't enough. Yeah. I have quite a few books too. And I like to keep stuff in physical copies, like this old dictionary, because everything's being adulterated and changed. Soup, I don't like soup for prepping purposes because calories per dollar, per space, per weight, all that stuff is not as fantastic for soup as it is compared to anywhere nearly as good as the stag chili or the other canned chilies or the spam, things like that. Even the canned pastas like Chef Boyardee type stuff. The soup is a lot of water. They don't tend to have a lot of actual calories in them. It's hard to find ones, especially if you're getting the ones that are clean ingredients without TVP, seed oils, and all this other stuff, which I try to do, which is one of the reasons I really am a fan of stag chili. It doesn't have any of that stuff. Soup is hard to get that, and since there's a lot of water, they can be big, heavy cans that are kind of expensive and don't actually offer that much calories. It's not a bad idea to have a few of them around simply because you can take a big can of soup and kind of not water it down, but use it to add rice or oats or whatever, or even pasta, some kind of chicken noodle thing, and kind of just use it more like a bouillon base with less work to have a little bit watered down. So just take that bowl of soup or that can of soup and 10x it. So you have like the spices and stuff flavoring that adds a little bit of flavor and stuff to what would otherwise be a boring pile of rice and spam or pasta or whatever else you want to do. So it can be useful for that to have a few of them lying around. And that's my plan with the chili. In fact, that's how I eat the chili now is I only eat half a can at a time and I add it to about like 3/4 of a pound or a pound of ground beef or ground lamb, where you just get a little bit of the flavor, a little bit of beans, stuff where you're not just having a ton of the carbs and everything, and that's delicious. And you can do that with rice, you can do that even oats if you needed to. So you can treat a 22 barrel in 5 minutes. How's the temperature in Vegas this summer? 120. I don't think we officially cracked one. I mean, maybe somewhere in the city it did at one point, but it was hitting 118. We've had like the record for the most amount of days that are over 110 by this point in the year. So very hot. It's to the point where I go outside and it's like 102 and it feels downright comfortable because I'm so used to 110 plus. And it's funny because everyone's always like, oh, what are you going to do when the power goes off? I'm like, it's going to suck. I'm not growing my own food here. I have a very small lot. It's very not any real land. So I'm not growing my own food here. I store food. I have 1.8 million calories stored. If you've seen my latest videos, that's the plan. But people always talk about temperature, and we got to remember that how we're living, and this is kind of what the mindset that made me a prepper in the first place, is that abundance and comfort and ease and everything that we've been enjoying for our entire lives and even for several generations. It's not the natural way of things. Like the opposite of what I said about the liberal or leftist idea that abundance is natural and is being kept from you. The natural state of a human being is naked and in the woods and either be cold, hot, hungry, whatever, exposed to the elements. And people have existed in places like this, Kuwait, the Middle East, and freezing temperatures for thousands of years before electricity and air conditioning was ever invented. So it's kind of annoying when people act like it's some absolute death sentence to have to be one of these places, during a shit the fan scenario. It certainly is something that needs to be considered, gone into with open eyes. Just like if you're somewhere where it's bitterly cold, you have to take preparations for that. But you have to take fewer preparations for the heat in most cases if you're not already physically compromised than you do for the cold, because as long as you have enough water here, shaded structure, it's just hot, sweat, smelly, gonna get a little sunburn sometimes, but there's not really a whole hell of a lot extra you have to do. other than just to enhance your comfort. And I have some fans. I have a portable little mini swamp cooler, evaporative cooler that I can run off my power station if I need to, if it's a long-term thing. So yeah, I agree that 100 degrees here feels like 85. Like 100 degrees here is like 80. Yeah, 80 in Florida. I'd rather have 100 here because it's so dry. As long as you're sitting in the shade, there's even some nice breezes here. In Florida, back when it was 95 would just be oppressive because you're super sticky. It'd be like mosquitoes out. Even in the shade, it doesn't matter. It's like swampy and stagnant. Much worse. I really don't mind the heat out here. It just takes some logistical considerations, like I said, and would be very uncomfortable. Not gonna lie, I would not be sleeping well. No AC, but I'm not gonna die. Learned that from the aquarium maintenance lady workforce. She said only feed them 2 to 3 times a week. They don't get 3 meals per day in the wild. You're talking about people? But yeah, I would almost certainly be in a survival situation, be doing OMAD or 2 meals a day just to save on the amount of like resources you have to use to cook the food, fuel, whatever, the time, the cleaning. There's absolutely no reason why you would need, and especially because we'd be using a pretty controlled um, rationing system. Calories, we wouldn't be eating all that much. I'd probably be eating definitely probably 2,000 calories a day max. Um, you can easily get that in 2 meals, save some cooking, stuff like that. Save some propane, save some time with the sun oven, all that sort of stuff. Let's get 1,000 calorie meals or 1,000 calorie meal twice a day if you want to put it that way. Because a can of stag chili, 600 calories. Add a little rice in there, you're at 1,000 calories. Whole spam a can, 1,000 calories. Um, so, and obviously I wouldn't just eat the can of spam like a brick, but it's not hard to get 1,000 calorie meal. So that's probably what I would do. Is then add in maybe a few snacks here and there with the other little things that we have stored. All right. Question time, guys. It's half hour past. Let me know what you guys want to talk about because I've covered the end game scenario or financial thing. And I think, like I said, the way to prepare for it, always want to talk about solutions, is look at what is failing. And as Gregor Manarino always says, be your own central bank. Look at what they're doing. The rich people are liquidating a lot of their assets that are probably likely to go down. It's always perilous to try to call a stock market crash or correction because of the nature of the melt up of the currency. But I do believe that there will be one significant tumult within the next 6 to 8 months. I only have like 100 cans of chili, so it's nothing crazy. Um, but so you could have physical cash. I recommend definitely having some for myself. It's not financial advice. I think it's a good idea. I think that there might be some opportunities to have good prices on equities and things like that. So I think short-term treasury bonds, like obviously the dollar is going to be dead DOA after a certain amount of time. But I still think treasury bonds are one of the safest things that you can do in the short term, the medium term. So I'm talking 30-day ones, not 10-year or anything like that, or probably even a little bit safer than money in a random bank account because banks are having awful time. Banks are failing all over the place. And all the physical things that you need are most important. Even if any of those things you do for money don't work out, then having what you need to eat, turn on a light, wipe your butt, take your medicine, to wash your ass after you wipe it, soap and water and things like that. And then, of course, my little Firefox, all the things, all the financial things. Like I said, my highest conviction trade goes back to the fact that we always end up doing the same thing. Got some of the oldest elements in the universe, literally forged in the heart of dying stars. Properties have no equal. Got to get some. Got to. My highest conviction opinion, which is not financial advice, it's my opinion. But I don't see any way around it. Got to get some. Just touch it. Once you have it in your hand, you'll understand. Something primeval blood memories take over when you touch it. You realize that this is wealth. And this shit is paper, cloth. It's not worth anything. Literal stardust. Empty promises. What are you going to rest your future on? I rest my case. How you doing, South Florida DCL? You're just in time for the question portion, whatever you guys want to talk about. And I plan on actually getting more cases of chili or more cans of chili. Because it's just a perfect prepper food if you like it. I literally can't think of anything better other than, I mean, even the freeze dry. If you're talking about all the factors that go into like choosing it, purchasing or whatever, you can't beat the canned chili. If you're talking about just like the good things, then the freeze dried food is pretty hard to beat because of the fact that like the taste, the shelf life, the weight are all fantastic. The cost is what is prohibitive for most people, and the preparation. There's a little bit of extra work in preparing it. Whereas a can of sag chili, you crack it open and eat it. You don't even have to warm it up if you didn't or weren't able to or didn't want to or whatever. Most canned goods, pretty much all canned goods, if I'm not mistaken, are safe to eat without additional cooking. I don't know of anything that really can be canned like raw and not just eaten raw. Or eat out of can because the whole process of canning requires heating it up and everything. Election season prediction. So far, things are pretty tame. Will we get more riots? Also, who do you think wins and what follows? It's hard for me to predict who will win because I don't think we've had completely fair elections in my lifetime. And I don't think we will in this one either. And they've shown themselves willing to do anything, literally anything. I think in a totally fair election, Donald Trump would win. It's insane to me that people are pretending to like Harris. Like she's the incumbent administration running on a bizarre reform kind of platform that she can't even articulate and has to steal elements from her opponent about like getting rid of taxes on tips when she was the tie-breaking vote for a bill that required like or that allowed more IRS reporting on tips. Specifically, she's an absolute disaster. She's a literal communist, idiot drunkard, and if she wins, it's bad news. The problem is, even if Trump wins, he's not going to fix any of the things that I've been talking about for the past 40 minutes. He will be infinitely better. He does a lot of good things, but he's not an ideologue. He doesn't understand the financial system in the way that he needs to literally fix everything. And even if he did, the things it would take to do that, I don't know if it would be within the power of one, even if Ron Paul became president, would he be able to actually do all the things that are needed without having the entire Congress and both sides of the House on his side? I don't know. Jimmy says, oh no, that was Jimmy's. Vamp says, would you smuggle 5 kilogram bar of silver from prison if you could keep it afterwards? Why do you think I got one in such a unique shape? That's not why I got that, but I think it was one of my buddies on here last time, SBQR, that mentioned that this was a surprisingly smuggleable shape. And this is 10 ounce. So, you have seen Pulp Fiction, where he's like, so I had this up my ass for 30 years. I'd be damned if I'd let them get their hands on my father's watch. So if that was my only option, no comment. Protein drinks have longer shelf life than chili. I think I have both. I mean, I don't know if that's technically true. Powdered anything can have a very, very good shelf life, but technically speaking, the shelf life of canned goods without a breech seal is indefinite. So I would think both are definitely good for 20 years, 25 years. Canned food lasts about 2 years. That's just a date on there. I've personally eaten 10-year-old canned goods, and they've done, as long as the seal isn't breached, you will have some degradation in texture, in nutritional quality, potentially, especially depending on what it is. Some things will be worse than others. But especially non-acidic foods, like canned tomatoes, probably the worst, but other regular foods will be fine. Should certainly be edible and safe 10, 20 years. I don't recommend doing that unless you had to, cycle through your stuff. But if you come across a pristine can that's 15 years old, I wouldn't have any reservations about eating that in a Japan scenario. Lost in spaces. Gold is good, but don't put everything into gold. Put some dollars into lead and brass to defend your gold from theft and for bartering with friends. Yeah, I mean, that's what I mentioned earlier on in this, is that this is money. This isn't a prep necessarily, other than this is saving money. This is how I save money, because this isn't money. This is a promise from people who are horrible liars and evil people. This is money. And so it's not a prep. You want to have your preps. You want to have your food. You want to have your medicine. You want to have your self-defense implements. Believe me, I have plenty of lead as well in terms of my precious metal holdings. Trump election kicks the ball down the road and potentially softens the blow. Correct. I mean, it will make a tremendous difference. Obviously, it's critical, I think. It would be absolutely horrific if she were to win. I really hope that doesn't happen, because it would be bad, bad, bad news. Literally, if she wins, the best case scenario is that we collapse extra quick in a way that the government loses a lot of their power. And that's not good. I don't want the country to collapse, but we would be in rough shape. But like I said, that Trump being elected be infinitely better, but it will not solve the system dying, the global debt-based fiat system dying. And I like what he said about the no CBDCs and all that stuff. So obviously I support him being president over Kamala Harris. She's a horrible, evil, stupid communist. And it would just be an unmitigated disaster if she were to somehow win. But Trump will not save you. That's all I can also say. But he will definitely be an improvement. And it's single-handedly due to him, pretty much. Not single-handedly, but if it weren't for him, we wouldn't have had any of these extremely significant Supreme Court wins that we've had. So remember that. Donald Trump if Donald Trump was not elected, just narrowly beat Hillary, and we would have 3 additional extremely liberal Supreme Court justices right now, I would already be in the. And the Chevron deference absolutely would not have been overturned. Bruin case, 100% would not have been decided that way. None of the other gun rights issues we've had big wins on. So it would be bad, bad news. We obviously it would be fantastic to get him back into office compared to the alternative, but he is not perfect. He exhibited many flaws, particularly in choosing people in his cabinet and whatnot, trusting them, which I don't see him having fixed that. He didn't show particularly good insight and choices in dealing with COVID, but it's to the point where there's absolutely no choice. He's like, the way I deal with it is I don't believe in the whole lesser of two evils thing. If someone is not good enough for me to think that they should be president of the United States, I will not vote, regardless of how bad the alternative is. I'm not going to vote for someone who I don't think is worthy of the position. I did not vote for McCain. I did not vote for Romney. And I did vote for Trump. I think he's over the threshold, and nobody's perfect. I think waiting for a perfect candidate is stupid. And I think people who are like, oh, he's controlled opposition, whatever, those people are stupid too. Just bend over and die then. Really think that they control everything. It's just some weird cut mindset to where to excuse inaction because everything's already decided, both sides of the control, blah, 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 whatever. I don't buy into that. Even if were true, it doesn't excuse you doing what you need to try to affect what you can affect. Take charge of your own life, etc. Donation place only takes up to 2 years. Yeah, I mean, because there is some liability issue too, to where they can't, if someone were to die of something, even if it wasn't from that, and they found out they're giving them wildly expired canned goods, but I'm just talking like scientifically, uh, there is no reason why canned goods would be unsafe years past their best by date if the seal is not breached or they're not dented and something like that. So if they're not rusted, they're not dented, I have no concerns personally. Do what you want, though. But it certainly makes more sense to cycle it out. There's no reason why you need to have stuff sitting there for 10 years. But I'm talking more along the lines of if you're already in a shit the fan scenario, like in the road or whatever, and they come across that bunker that has all these canned goods in there, you're gonna fucking eat that shit. If it's 15 years old, probably gonna be fine. Got some more stag chili this weekend. Hell yeah, brother. And like I said, I posted on the community page is the stag chili seems about normal price compared to Walmart, maybe a little more than Walmart, depending on your local prices. Um, but the spam for some reason is occasionally very cheap on Amazon. The other day, the low sodium one, which is the one I go ahead and grab if they, as long as they have it. I'm not too worried about sodium, but I don't think there's any reason to have extra. So I normally get the low sodium spam, but check on the Amazon listing because a lot like they'll have these sales and you can get a case of it, and it's prime delivery, so it's delivery is included at what works out to about 233 a can, 250 a can, which is like a dollar 25 a can cheaper than what you can normally get it in the store. It's extremely rare for me to find it in the store these days for less than 330 a can. Usually it's 350 a can, 360 a can of spam. And that's still worth it because it's 1,000 calories of actual meat, good protein, good fat that's hard to get for preparedness foods. And so that's still worth it. But getting it 230, 2 cans for $5 basically, that's a steal these days. So I would jump on that if you don't have the spam, if it's still on that price on Amazon. I don't get the flavored spams, Destiny. I stick with the regular one. I feel like most of the time all this flavored stuff is artificial and just unnecessary and doesn't really add that much to it. But and I don't even know if we can really tell that much of the bacon flavor. And I haven't tried the, I think it's like a jalapeno one or whatever. I just stick with the low sodium or the regular, whatever's cheapest. We tasted MREs that were years past their date and still tasted edible. Yep, all that retort packaging stuff will last really good too if it hasn't been exposed to too high temperatures. Like if it's in a Connex and they're all puffy and bloated, I would be wary. But like a normal MRE, they're designed to last for 10 years plus. Yeah, fried spam with eggs is the best way to eat it. I've also, you can make like a fried rice with it, like dice it up, fry it in the pan, throw the rice on. That's really good too. Thin slice fried, you can put on sandwiches. It's all sorts of stuff. It's really not that bad. I haven't had the turkey black pepper one. I don't think I've even had the turkey spam to begin with. But yeah, if you guys don't have it, jump on that on Amazon. And honestly, I think Amazon, I've created, I think you guys should all do this too. Because we're at a time where, like I said, most of us preppers see these things coming way, way ahead of time compared to the average person, general population. So I think there's a lot of moderate shit the fans or signals that we could rely on that would allow us to buy things, even on Amazon, certainly at the store locally. But Amazon has like 1-2 day delivery. There's a lot of situations where you could say, uh-oh, and we know we have at least a couple days to get a last minute order in. I have a specific wish list. It's like a private just shopping list for myself on Amazon of all the things to just go ahead and go boom, load up on one final shipment, see what happens if any number of certain things happen. Like war kicks off with Taiwan, nuke goes off, different things like that, where I could say bam. And being in a bigger city here, we even have a local distribution center where there's a lot, I don't want to say half, but a good 10-20% of the items, especially grocery type stuff, can be same day delivery or next day, a lot of it next day delivery, a lot, and a portion of it even same day delivery. So try to get that last order in. Worst case scenario, if it's really bad, you just don't get it. But you can hit that, then run to the local store and try to get some stuff locally as well. But yeah. Millet at Walmart is very cheap. 10 calories is sweet. Yeah, I mean the grains are obviously one of the primary preparedness foods for storage. It stores easily for super long periods of time, very calorically dense. It's all carbs. And that's why I focus on stuff like the Spam and the chili, because it is hard to store anything other than carbs long term for preparedness reasons. And canned foods is the easiest way to do that. And the canned chili and the canned Spam are the cheapest slash best slash easiest of those. Have you tried the hot and spicy Spam? And if so, how? I have not. I'm not big on spicy stuff. I don't feel the need. Most I'll ever do is like medium wings. I don't need spice. I'm like Tim Walt was pretending to be before they figured out that he was just like some weird humiliation ritual. For those of you who don't know, there's this weird video where they came out, um, where Kamala was like, there was like some one of these weird humiliation rituals slash something they did to get brown people votes, where they were like, "Oh, I'm a white person. I sure can't handle my spice. Ketchup is spicy to me. My tacos are basically just meat and mayonnaise or whatever." And they laughed at Kamala. I was like, "Ha ha ha! I'll teach you how to be a real human because white people don't season they food or whatever." And it can't have been an accident that they specifically chose tacos. They had to have done this on purpose as some sort of weird humiliation ritual because Mike Cernovich actually on a hunch was like, this guy lies, but looked up. He has literally won a contest for a spicy taco recipe years beforehand, specifically tacos. And I was like, that cannot be a coincidence that they chose tacos for this to him, for him to do this thing about, and like, what kind of absolute pathological liar slime ball do you have to be to go along with this and either participate in this purposeful humiliation ritual or somehow be willing to allow your presidential candidate that you were the running mate for to stick their foot, not to be like, let's do something other than tacos. Because you could easily like flim flam your way around it if you're more diversionally and be like, well, tacos have actually can handle a little spice, but, and then, kind of hand wave it away. No, they specifically did this whole skit, basically what it was about a product, a specific food item that he has literally won an award for making. So fucking bizarre. So fucking bizarre. Yeah, it's funny because Destiny says Mexican spices are candy ass. There is a meme out there that says like it's funny how people are always making fun of white people for not seasoning their food, where it's like that's all upper class, like white people. Because like every white person I know that's like Southern and everything, they go to Ace Hardware and buy the hottest thing, the hottest spice called like anus prolapser or whatever, or like gut destroyer or whatever, and these insane ghost pepper hot sauces and stuff. So I'm like, I don't know where this, and not to mention literally conquered entire continents to get the spice trade going. So like whatever. And the thing about the Mexicans, like the spices of these other countries, is that there's no like nuance to it. They're not seasoning it. They're just like dumping some random flavor onto it, just overpower everything else. I'm like, okay, I don't just want to literally only taste burning. Um, doesn't mean you don't like seasoning on your food. So bizarre. Yeah, Thai food is can be pretty brutal. I don't fuck around with that. I don't need food. I can eat spicy food, and I'm just like, yep, that sure is spicy. All I taste is pepper burning now, and you have no other flavor. Um, I don't need that. I like to actually taste the meat, taste the food. Yeah, it's all about Scoville rating. Dog food, batteries, as much canned veggies I can find. Just be careful with the canned veggies because a lot of them will be surprisingly low on calories. Um, Really only grains, meat, like animal fats, and starches have any sort of actual calories in them. Vegetables, well, fruits. Vegetables don't have any calories. Green beans, like the starches, like potatoes, will have some. Um, Grains will have some, like the rice and the wheat, stuff like that. But vegetables and the fruits with sugar, but straight up vegetables, cucumbers, okra, green beans, um, they don't have almost any calories. So be careful with that stuff. You can end up having a lot of space taken up and a lot of money and very few calories. You have like peas and spinach and green beans, stuff like that. Very little. So stick with, I mean, obviously it's fine to have that stuff to mix it in for just variety, for like it, whatever, but stick with the grains, the fruits, the meats, starches, like legumes and grains, potatoes, stuff like that. I have Super Pails, good for 20 years, full of rice, beans, etc. for the carbs. Yep, that's the best way to go. And beans are absolutely cheapest and easiest for most people, even more so than the other grains because there's no processing involved. All you literally have to do is cook slash and just soak them. So it's perfectly fine if you want to deal with grain mill, whole wheat berries, all that stuff, but that's a lot of extra preparation required. So keep that in mind. I don't really eat wheat to begin with, very rarely. So I don't have it as part of my preparation plan because I don't need to make bread. I just eat rice, beans, or the oats, or the meats. Yeah, it's just true. They can have calories in it, but like I said, just make sure you don't have fewer calories than you think. You get a pantry full of vegetables and only have a few weeks worth of calories. Yeah, you'll get all your vitamins, but you can get all your vitamins from meat too, and multivitamin. So it's definitely fine to have some of that stuff, but you just don't want to try to make the bulk of your money spent on foods that don't actually give you that much time of sustainment from calories. 5 minutes outside of Washington, D.C. Feel for you, brother. Are fences up still around the Capitol? Well, there's new ones up because, well, apparently they don't work to keep people out of the country, or that's not worthwhile to keep the citizens from being murdered and raped and their resources taken. It's okay to keep their own. What's funny is that they have to have those fences up for other leftists who are like pro-Palestine people and the Antifa types. It's not Republicans and Trump supporters that are going to go wreck the city around the Democratic National Convention. And it's funny because I have people that like making fun of how the Republican National Convention had like Hulk Hogan saying idiocracy and be like, and I'm like, just you wait to see the parade of fucking subhumans and freak show barnyard oddities that they parade out at the DNC. And then I will say, give me Camacho, Herbert Mountain Dew Camacho Jones any day of the week. So no 1,000 cans of asparagus. I mean, do it, bro. As long as you have 10,000 cans of other stuff. Asparagus is great. Canned asparagus is not as good as fresh. Kind of tends to get like slimy. Not a big fan of canned asparagus. I love asparagus when it's like seared or fried in a pan with like garlic and stuff, butter. That's really good. But not going to give you a lot of calories. Canned isn't as good. But there's no food that you just like shouldn't store. I'm just saying be aware of how many calories you're actually storing. Because especially when it comes to short term, because people always say, they mention the vitamins and stuff like that. You have to have an extremely restrictive diet to suffer from some of these maladies of like restrictive diet in anything under like a year at least. If you're having, and even remotely, if you're having some canned meat, some canned grains and stuff like that, like most people are not going to suffer. Most people's diets don't include very many of these vitamins and stuff as is. So if you have some animal products, a couple vegetables and grains, and throw in the multivitamin and all this stuff. Throw in some vitamin C pills, and you should have like I did a whole video. I will hopefully try to put a link in the description later to a video about different supplements and non-food type dietary preps that I have. Stuff like protein powder, stuff like creatine, stuff like Metamucil or fiber if you have trouble adjusting to a new diet, stuff like vitamins, which ones I use, things like that, which you should be doing anyway. I think I credit a lot of the supplements and vitamins I'm taking with the fact that I've ever gotten COVID, to my knowledge. Have you ever tried hammock camping? I have not. There's zero chance I would ever be able to sleep in a hammock without extreme discomfort or pain. I can't sleep in like position like that or really mess up my back. And also I move around way too much, got the Jimmy legs and thrash about it. And it's extremely uncomfortable for me to try to sleep in a hammock. I'd rather sleep on a concrete slab. Could never do it. People lived okay for a year on only potato. Exactly. I mean, like you're gonna eventually have some issues if you literally only eat like one thing, but it takes a lot longer than you think, especially if you have some animal products in. There are Inuit tribes that supposedly subsisted on diets almost entirely of red meat. There are plenty of people these days who do a carnivore diet, and there are some people, genetics is a huge part of this, who will eventually have some um, issues from that. A lot of people know. And there's even people who I was reading about, this girl who had one of these disorders where she just like wouldn't eat any food other than McDonald's chicken nuggets. Not even just chicken in general, but like specifically McDonald's chicken nuggets. And her parents were indulging this. And she did that for like 15 years before she finally had some sort of weird health complication that manifested where she had to be like, dealt with medically. And so, like I said, meat, if you're getting some meat, some animal products, that'll take care of a lot of it. Animals have pretty much everything in them that we can eat, especially if you're getting a varied organ meats and stuff like that. But if you have just a reasonably diverse diet, throw in a couple of these vitamins, you'll have most vast majority of people will have absolutely no issues until, it would take years most of a very specific thing that might be missing that their body is also not good at holding on to. Because that happens with people too. Like some people will just have an inability to either synthesize something as well, or to hold on to their tissues as well, or to hold on to it too much, that sort of thing. But you should hopefully know about that stuff already if you have an issue. You can look right at the sun through the California fires. Oh yeah, it was bad here a while ago, but it's not too bad right now. Sleep diagonal in a hammock, then your back does a curve. I don't think there's any way to sleep in a hammock without your back curving. Might curve a little bit less, but Jack in the Box nugs are better. I'm not a huge fan of Jack in the Box, like just because like every time I go, it's one of the few places. Annoyingly, Vegas is now. I don't eat fast food very often, and if I do, I try to just go to get Lord's Chicken, Chick-fil-A. But ever since COVID, Vegas is shockingly no longer very 24-hour catering. Um, most places are closed after 11 or midnight. And out here, a few places, Del Taco is open, Roberto's is open, and Jack in the Box is one of the 24-hour places that's still open, maybe a couple other small places. But their menu is like extreme. They have like 50 things. So I don't go there very often. So occasionally when I have to, because it's the only place that's open, I make food and I'm getting out of a poker tournament and, and late. I'm like, what the fuck is all this? It's like a shitload of stuff. I don't know if I've ever had their nuggets. There are definitely not very many trees out here, but it's not a complete lack of trees. There is one tree right next to my fucking pool in my neighbor's yard that dumps leaves in it. Like, no trees anywhere except right next to my pool. My plan is chickens, sheep, and maybe a couple milk goats. That is a fantastic plan. In fact, there's a great channel that I have been watching lately because I eventually plan on having some kind of similar type farm. I think she's called the Shepherdess or something. And she does videos about raising meat sheep specifically. Yeah, the Shepherdess. She has quite a few subscribers now. A little blonde girl lives out in Texas, I think, raises sheep. And she just had a video about like what she would do to make the most like productive, self-sufficient homestead on like 3 acres, I think. If you have at least 2 or 3 acres, maybe a little bit more. And that video was pretty much ended up with, like you're saying, she had a certain number of sheep, chickens, and a couple milk goats. So that's a good setup. They shut a lot of the buffets, which is they did. That was the worst because there were a lot of these things out here that were like basically loss leaders that they used to bring people into the casino, but they didn't really make money off of them. But you couldn't really close it because then everyone would just go to the other place that had a buffet. But when everyone had to shut down at once, then just like nobody brought it back because they were like, I'm not going to be the first one to bring it back. So only like really lost tons of buffets and tons of poker rooms actually shut down because they're the same thing. They don't actually make a whole lot of money for the casino. They obviously make money. It's impossible to like lose money on them unless they're retarded. But compared to a normal casino floor of slot machines, they don't really make an impressive amount of money. And so a lot of them that had smaller rooms, they just didn't bring them back. And the buffets, I know the Caesar's Bacchanal buffet came back. I think the Silver one came back and the South Point one. But it used to be everywhere had a buffet. Every place had a buffet, and most do not. Maverick gas station. You still have money after the poker tournaments? I'm not sure I understand the question. I have more money after the poker tournaments. This got first place in one, got $6,000. And I have to, but that's not all problem because I have paid for some that I did not win. But in general, I have more money because but mostly play cash. I don't play too many tournaments. Yes, I watch her channel. She's great for learning. She's fantastic. I'll have to find that one. I love Roberto's. I order the breakfast. Yeah, the breakfast burrito. That is the move. The breakfast burrito and the caramel churros. Not all of them have the caramel churro though. And I swear these guys were fucking with me one time because I went and they were like, look at this gringo. And I was like, ordered the breakfast burrito and I was like, the caramel churro. And I even said it like, right, like churro. And the guy was like, what? And I'm like, the churro, caramel churro. And he was like, oh, churro. And I'm like, bitch, I said it right. Like, you know what I'm fucking talking about. It may not have sounded like I was born and raised in fucking Tijuana or whatever, but like you know what I'm saying. Vegas was a city that never sleeps. Used to be. Now they've gotten kind of just most of the places. I mean, the casinos are always open. There's always 20, but not all the restaurants in them. So there's always bars, like if you go to a PT's or something like that. But like the Walmart used to be 24 hours after COVID. They stopped that. Um, so a lot of the stuff like that. So the casinos, obviously, and the bars and the clubs, that's all 24 hours. But like when I'm coming back and I'm like, I need food, I'm not going to go to like PT's and order mozzarella sticks. I say churro like I buy them at Costco. Churros, por favor, quesadilla. They should know that. But yeah, any last minute thoughts or questions from you guys? I've got another little power station I'm going to be making a video on soon from Oops, however you say it. Stoked about that. Gonna do some shooting vids coming up and should be fun. But thank you guys for watching. Stay tuned. Stay safe out there. Talk to you soon.